Awesome to be here for Gen Blue, and I have to say, I said this in my morning session, it's so awesome to see how you guys are really shaking things up here at Coldwell Banker. It's pretty cool, this whole setup here at Gen Blue. It's really, really exciting stuff. What people up in the bleachers, hello to all of you, thank you. It's very cool to be here. I always feel like I'm on a Broadway stage, so. Anyways, I'm excited. Off Broadway. So, just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard me speak before, or maybe read one of my articles, or been to a webinar, or anything like that? A few of you? Okay. So thank you for those of you who know me. For those of you who don't know me, I've been in the industry since about 2005. I work in the San Francisco Bay Area and started in real estate working for a small brokerage, kind of a boutique brokerage. And then from there, went on to work for Inman News. I worked for Inman for about 3 years, was their social media director, did a lot of training, a lot of speaking for Inman. When I came to Inman, we had a social profile of about 6,000 likes and followers and friends. And now Inman's hovering around 300,000. Which is kind of exciting. So I was able to do a lot of work with them. A year ago, I went out on my own, started my own consulting firm, and it's been kind of fast and furious. Actually, October 1st was my 1-year anniversary of being an entrepreneur. This is pretty exciting. Thank you. And I have the good pleasure of working with a lot of companies in the real estate space. So a lot of companies and vendors who have fantastic products and have great marketing teams contact me because they need help with social. And so I do a lot of consulting work for companies in the real estate and mortgage space. And I also do a lot of speaking. So I do a lot of traveling and speaking at conferences and things like that. So I'm happy to be here today. Really excited about this presentation about recruiting for social media. I take it most of you are probably brokers or owners or business development people or managers. We might have a few agents in here as well. But this is a topic that I feel doesn't get covered as much. And when I think about social and really kind of the next wave in social, I think there's some really big opportunities. So again, my topic is recruiting through social. Here's my information as well. You can find me on Twitter. If you're tweeting right now, it's at Katie Lance. And so let me go ahead and dive right in. You know, I feel like in social, especially from where all of you are sitting, there's really some unique opportunities in social. But there's also some unique challenges because many times a lot of you wear different hats, right? Sometimes you're the agent, sometimes you're the broker, maybe you're the manager, maybe some days you're the receptionist answering the phone. You might be wearing all different types of hats at your office. And with that, there comes a lot of layers to your sort of social personality and how that comes across on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all the different networks that we have out there. So, you know, when I think of social layers, there's really a few different ones, and these all really come into play when we talk about recruiting and retention, which I'm really going to dive into today. So, thinking of things of your own presence and how your own social presence and how you portray yourself personally. You know, even if you don't friend other agents, even if you don't friend other clients, you still have that personal presence on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever network you're on. So how does that play into everything? Your brand presence. So, you know, Coldwell Banker, being a part of Coldwell Banker, that's part of your brand, of course, but also on a local level, what that means locally. And then your agents, right? Just out of curiosity, how many in here are broker owners? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you are managers? Okay. How about everybody else? Okay, so lots of different layers to your business, of course, and many times they sort of intersect. I said in my morning class today, it's not really black or white. We used to be, you know, in our previous lives, we used to say, well, business is over here and personal is over here, and I want to keep them separate. And that's not always the case, because social is a really personal piece of communicating. And one of the ways that you can really leverage social media, especially when it comes to recruiting and retaining, is to keep that personal piece of it. And I'm going to talk more about that today. So where can you really integrate social media into your recruiting strategy? First of all, I want to sort of put aside a few myths, because I think sometimes, especially when you hear social media speakers, sometimes we tend to say it's the end all and be all. And as much as I love social, it's certainly not the end all and be all. In my opinion, it's just one more tool. It's one more way to communicate. It's one more way to reach out. And I don't know about you, but I feel like we're living in a really exciting time right now, especially when it comes to technology and what's happening with the speed of things. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming though, right? With all the new technologies and the new phones and the new apps and everything that's coming out. But one of the things I feel is important is it doesn't replace certain things. So it doesn't replace the phone call, right? It doesn't replace that face-to-face time. Social certainly doesn't replace meeting for coffee or lunch or cocktails or whatever it might be. It doesn't replace a handwritten note. I'm a big fan of the handwritten note, by the way. Isn't there something really special about getting a handwritten note, especially nowadays? But really, when I think of social, especially when it comes to recruiting, is social, in my opinion, really opens up a window into someone's life. And I think of no better industry than real estate to really be able to capitalize on social from an agent perspective, but really from a broker, a manager perspective as well. Because in the past, if you think about it, the people we were trying to recruit and retain, we knew, not a whole lot about them. We might know how long they've been in the business. We might know, the brokerage they're at and their transaction history. We might have known all these sort of business-related things. But what we may not have known was the personal aspect of things. And if you think of why agents move from one company to another, sure, a lot of times it's because of the split or a percentage or this or that. But the other piece of it is the connection, right? Wouldn't you agree that a lot of times agents move because they don't feel that they're being recognized and they don't feel that connection with either their manager or their broker. And so that's where social, I really feel like, opens up an opportunity, because in social and Facebook and Twitter and all these networks, we're sharing more than ever before. We're sharing the Little League photos and the pictures of when we go on vacation and everything in between. And we really have a window of insight like we've never had before. A good example, this is just from my news feed a few weeks ago. When you look at what people are sharing on Facebook, they're sharing vacations and kids and everything in between. And sometimes we wonder, well, gosh, why do people share all that? Well, that's sort of the time that we're living in right now. You go to an event, you go out to dinner, you eat breakfast, you take a photo, and you share it with all your friends. And some people go, well, that's kind of silly, I don't know. But it is definitely the culture that we're living in right now, where people are sharing more than ever before. They're checking in on Foursquare, they're posting things like this. And by paying attention to some of the things that people are posting is one of the best ways that we can really connect, especially when we're trying to recruit people into real estate. So the other thing about social is that if you're trying to attract kind of the tech-savvy, social, Gen X, Gen Y, millennial, whatever you want to call them, if you want to attract that type of person, you also need to be on those platforms at some level. Now, I don't necessarily believe that you need to be everywhere. I don't think you need to be all things to all people. I think it can be kind of challenging to be on every single platform. But I think it's something to think about of who is your target recruit. And if you are trying to target that person who is Gen X, Gen Y, millennial, kind of that up-and-coming real estate agent, social media is certainly the place where a lot of them are at. So I'm going to cover a few things today. I'm going to cover personal. I know I already touched on a little bit about that, but how you can personally really connect with people through social, how to be really intentional with social. I think this is something that's really important. A lot of times social is pretty haphazard. Sometimes it's a pretty random event. I like to say stop the random acts of social media. If you're tweeting, tweet that. But how to be more intentional, make the most of your time. I have a social recruiting formula I'm excited to share with you. You guys are the first people to see this formula, so I'm excited to show this to you. A little formula I have for social recruiting success, and then talking a little bit about leading from the top, because I think that's an important piece of it as well. You might have someone in your office, maybe you have a marketing person who is sort of handling your local brand presence and they're managing your Facebook page, but what's your piece in it? And if you're going to use social to recruit and retain, a big piece of it is leading from the top and leading by example. So I'm going to touch on that in a few minutes as well. So personal. So, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Foursquare, Instagram, Pinterest, all of these platforms work because of the personal piece of it. And so I want to share with you a few ways that you can use these platforms to really showcase your story and connect with people. So one of the first things I always like to say is be a storyteller. Be a storyteller. We all have a story to tell. Where you live, where you work, your kids, your family, maybe you're a pet person, a dog person, you're into wine, you're into food, you're into sports. We all have a story. And so I want to share, these are just a few recent photos. I do a lot of traveling, I do a lot of speaking. And so one of the things I'm pretty intentional about is I know a lot of my travel photos connect with people, right? It's a great way to talk about what I do without really talking about what I do. if that makes sense. So I share photos. This is from O'Hare. Here's a photo of somewhere over Canada. This is in Ottawa. Beautiful, beautiful Parliament there. And so if you were to go on my Facebook page as a good example, I share a lot of things like travel. I share my kids. I share things that I do. And the reason why that all works is because I'm not just talking about business, right? If you think about how you connect with people, I mentioned this morning a little bit. If you think about how you connect with people when they share things beyond just business, right? If you were to go on your Facebook feed and all you saw were people talking about real estate and business, you kind of tune that out, right? You kind of, you might go, I'm sick of that. I want to block that person because all they're doing is talking about business. Because the point of social is to be social, right? So be a storyteller. I have a couple cool examples here. This is an Instagram photo from a good friend of mine, Raj Kassar. He's a broker out in Orange County in Southern California. He uses Instagram really, really well to tell the story of his brokerage. And this is a great example. This is a new agent who came on board. You can't really see, there's some light pink text across the top that says, please welcome Michelle Chin, with the hashtag for their office. And so he uses Instagram as a way to welcome any new agent that he brings on board. It's a little thing, but it helps him connect with his demographic. He really is trying to target Gen X, Gen Y, millennials. So he takes that photo, he puts it on Instagram, he tweets it out, he posts it on Facebook. And it's really sort of that perception that you're putting out there that, this person's socially savvy. Here's another great example. I had to borrow one of the Gen Blue pictures. I think I saw Lindsay sneak in here. She's in here somewhere. But I love what Coldwell Banker's doing on a national level. If you haven't seen what Coldwell Banker's doing on Pinterest and Instagram and all the different platforms, it's a great model to follow as far as how do you tell the story of your brand without telling the same thing over and over again, and posting things like fun pictures or behind the scenes. If you think about your own office, what are opportunities to kind of tell the story of your office? Do you have a Friday lunch? Do you have a barbecue? Do you, every time you have a new agent, are you making that person feel really, really special? And what we used to do is we used to have an office meeting, which some of you probably still have office meetings, have an office meeting and you go, hey, we'd love to welcome so-and-so, and they stand up and you give them a round of applause. That's great. And maybe you send out a postcard or you put an ad in the paper announcing that person. But what about doing something like this where you're also recognizing them on social? And you posted your business Facebook page or even your personal Facebook page and you say, hey, I'd love to welcome so-and-so to our team. I couldn't be happy that they're here working with Coldwell Banker XYZ, right? And doing a lot of what you're already doing, but translating it to social as well. One of the big opportunities with social in recruiting is to be a good finder. So we're given all this insight about people's lives. They got a job promotion, they just had a baby, they just got married, something not so great happened, people share happy times, sad times. And there's some great opportunities. Facebook voice messages is something that's actually fairly new to Facebook. And it's a really kind of a cool way where you can just send a private voice message through Facebook. It's fairly new, but I have to tell you, every time I ever send a Facebook voice message, I always get the response of, how did you do that? And the way that you do it is through an app called Facebook Messenger. So Facebook Messenger is a free app. It's also an app where you can just send private messages back and forth. It's easier than using the regular Facebook app. The regular Facebook app is a little clunky sometimes. So Facebook Messenger is just for the private messages. And you can send regular text messages as you normally would with Facebook, but you can also send voice messages up to a minute in length. And you might go, well, I could just call the person, right? And yes, you could call. It goes back to what I said earlier. It doesn't replace a phone call. But there's an opportunity in social to kind of surprise people and do sort of the unexpected. So, it might be someone's birthday. We all know, Facebook posts when it's people's birthdays. And you could write on their wall, happy birthday, with the other 200 people that wrote on their wall. Or you could send them a private 20-second voice message on Facebook and say, hey, so-and-so, I saw it was your birthday. I hope you have a great day today with your family. Just thinking about you. Right? Not creepy, not weird, but just something kind of cool, something a little bit different, a little bit out of the ordinary. So I love using those. I think it's a great way just to kind of surprise people a little bit. Being a good finder. I think this is such a great opportunity, especially when we talk about recruiting. Being a good finder. Google Alerts. How many of you have Google Alerts set up for your office? Your brand, your company, your name? A few of you? Okay. So if you don't have Google Alerts set up, I highly recommend you do this. Just go into Google and type in Google Alerts, and it'll take you right to it. And Google Alerts is a free service. You can have any search term. And what I recommend is, first of all, you have your office as a search term, have your name. But for recruiting, have people that you're trying to recruit set up Google Alerts for them. And what happens when you set up a Google Alert is it'll send you an email once a day of any time where your name or your company name or any search term is mentioned. So if you put your say you put your company name in there and you get mentioned, twice on Yelp because you get a review, or you get mentioned in a blog that someone mentions you get a Google Alert about that. It's a great way to manage your brand, but it's also a really great way to be a good finder. Meaning if you have a hit list of, let's say you've got, 10 agents you're trying to actively recruit, I would set up 10 Google Alerts for those people. I would put their name in there, put their name in quotes. So for me, I have Katie Lance in quotes. Otherwise, if I just have Katie Lance, it would find everything Katie and everything Lance. So don't do that. So put the name in quotes. And if it's a common name, I'll warn you that Google Alerts don't work as well. Like if your name is like Joe Smith, it's a little challenging. But the point of this is you get an email to your inbox, right? And if they get a great review on Yelp, or they get a great recommendation on Zillow, or they get something really positive, someone wrote a blog about them, you see that. And then you can reach out to them on social and say, hey, congratulations, did you see this? It looks like you had a great transaction. And just kind of being a good finder. A lot of times when you do this, you will find things that they didn't even realize were out there. Even if it's something negative, maybe there's a bad review or something that pops up, you can private message them and say, hey, I don't know if you saw this, just wanted you to be aware of it, just kind of being on the lookout for things like that. It's a little thing that can make a big difference. Prospecting. So there's some really kind of cool opportunities to prospect with social media. Facebook graph search is something that came out close to probably about a year ago. If you don't have Facebook graph search, there's a link right there at the bottom, facebook.com/about/graph search. So facebook.com/about/graph search. And what Facebook graph search is basically a much better way to search on Facebook than what Facebook previously had. Facebook was pretty notorious for having a really bad search function, and it's getting better and better. So with Facebook graph search, you can really search beyond just your friends, which really comes into play when you talk about recruiting for social media. Because one of the benefits is not just your own network, but your friends' networks and their networks, right? Sort of the layers of social media. So for example, here's a good example of something you could do with Facebook graph search. You can go in there and search your friends of friends. So you could put in my friends of friends who work for Apple, which is the search I did right here. I did that and put my friends of friends who work for Apple, and you could see it sort of pulled up my friends of friends who work at Applebee's, my friends of friends who work for Apple Food, my friends and friends who work for Apple Inc. in Cupertino. The point of doing this is if there is someone you want to meet, or maybe there's certain agents who work for a certain company that you want to try to recruit, and the whole idea of prospecting obviously is sort of putting some feelers out there. So using Facebook graph search, it's a really kind of a great way to see who your friends on Facebook, who they're connected to. Now, when I did this search, for example, I had probably about 50 people that were connected to someone who worked at Apple. Now, if I was trying to get into Apple, for example, I probably wouldn't reach out to that friend of friend directly because they don't know me, but I might send that friend a personal message on Facebook and say, hey, hope everything's going good. Hey, I saw you're connected to so-and-so. Would you mind introducing me? Right? And just kind of asking for that invitation personally, either through Facebook, Twitter, or whatever network you might be on. But this is something that we're really seeing the infancy. Graph search, like I said, came out probably about a year ago, and it's still kind of rolling out. It's really interesting when you start diving in. Most of us with Facebook, our friends are kind of all over the place, meaning we don't really have our friends organized. Some of you might have lists set up, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But it's a great way to search friends who work for a certain company, friends who work in a specific area, and really see who you're connected to. Really cool prospecting idea. So speaking of lists, that's a perfect segue. So one of the best ways to get really intentional about recruiting for social is to use lists. And you can set up lists in Facebook as well as Twitter. So Facebook lists are private. Twitter lists can be private or public. And I want to kind of walk through a few things here. So one of the things I recommend is, all of you probably have either a database or a hit list or a wish list of agents that you would love to come to your office. I really recommend that you take that list and you move it to social, meaning send them a request to connect on LinkedIn. If you're close to them, if you've had multiple conversations, connect with them on Facebook. I wouldn't recommend connecting with them right out of the blue, right? Sometimes that's a little uncomfortable. But if you had some good conversations with them. But once you are friends with someone on Facebook, you can organize your friends into lists. And I recommend that you create 2 lists. So one would be your agents. So the agents, obviously, that are in your office. And then the second would be your potential agents or your recruits. Okay? And the way you do this is there's also a link right here, facebook.com/bookmarks/lists. So facebook.com/bookmarks/lists. The reason why this is important, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier today when I was talking about social, is that on Facebook specifically, we're connected to hundreds of people. The person you went to high school with, somebody you went to college with, somebody you worked with 10 years ago. Your kids are on there, someone's playing Farmville or Candy Crush. It's sort of a hot mess, right? So to get really strategic about social and use it for recruiting, create a couple lists. So now, instead of having 500 people that you look at on Facebook every single day, you can take 10 or 15 minutes every day and look at your agents. And now you only see 50 or 100 or 20 or however many agents are in your office. Same thing with your recruits. If you have 10 people on your hit list, or 20 or 30, and you happen to be Facebook friends with them, have them on a list. And then what you're going to do is you're going to authentically connect with them. So you're going to look at that list once a day. And I know, all of you are busy. You certainly don't have time to be on Facebook or Twitter all day long, nor should you be. But if you only have 10 minutes a day, I always say this, if you only have 10 minutes a day, take 10 minutes, look at your agents list on Facebook or Twitter, look at your potential agents list on Facebook or Twitter, or both, and then look and see what they're talking about. And what you're going to see is you're going to see pictures of when they went to dinner last night. You're going to see pictures of their kids. You're going to see pictures of Little League and vacation, back to school nights, all that stuff. And what do? You engage with them. You click like, you comment, you interact, you share. Now, as I always like to say, don't click like on everything. Don't be that person, right? But you authentically interact with them. And this is how you build relationships on social. And when you think of recruiting and building a relationship and why do people change brokerages and why do people change offices, why do people leave, it's that, again, feeling appreciated and feeling that connection. And of course, it doesn't replace the coffee. It doesn't replace the phone call. It doesn't replace the face-to-face. But having that interaction, having that validation. Think about the last time some of you posted a photo to Facebook. By the way, how many of you have a Facebook profile? Raise your hand. Okay, most of you. How many of you are on Facebook right now? Kind of tough for the Wi-Fi, right? But so most of you have Facebook. So if you were to post a photo to Facebook, I guarantee if you're like most people, you post a photo. I did this just last night. I posted a photo of the beautiful New York skyline. About 5 minutes later, I look back at my phone like, anybody like it? Anybody comment? Right? We all want to be validated. So once a day, take 5 or 10 minutes, look at your to list, and authentically engage with those people. You may think, what's the big deal? It's just a like or a comment. But relationships are built with small interactions over the course of time. Right? Relationships are built with these small interactions over the course of time. So connect, like I said, 10 minutes a day. Be authentic. We have I think all of us are very skeptical of people, right? I always like to say this might be the non-PC thing to say, but our BS meter is kind of high these days, right? So just be really authentic, be real. Again, don't click like on everything, but comment and engage. It's a little thing that makes a big difference. So bridging the digital gap. Like I mentioned earlier, we have so much more information about people than we ever did before. And it really helps us to bridge that digital gap. So when you're on the phone, mention what you saw on social media. Hey, I just saw you guys just got back from Hawaii. How was that? Oh my gosh, you stayed in Kaanapali? I love that place. Where, whatever. Again, Don't be creepy, don't be the stalker who knows every single thing about them, but use that as an opportunity to have it be a conversation. And use online conversations as a reason to reach out. You know, if you see that someone, you know, something really exciting happened in their family, or something maybe not, you know, not so exciting, whatever it might be, maybe that's a reason to reach out, ask them for, you know, ask them to meet up for coffee, send them a note in the mail, pick up the phone. Authenticity, really, really important. I feel like I've said that a few times, but it's really key. It's just being real, being yourself, which is also the reason why with social as a broker or manager, you can't delegate all of it. Because this personal piece of it, it has to come from you, right? Who's the one that's going to be commenting on your agent's photos of their kids? A marketing person or you, right? You want to connect with that person. And that marketing person in your office still is an important person, still has an important role, but there's the piece of it that you've got to, you have to engage as well. Are you open for business? So I talked a lot about being intentional and connecting, but you also need to make sure that your profiles are up to date. So being open for business, just make sure that you've got, you know, your LinkedIn profile is up to date. You've got a current picture on there. I know sometimes we're guilty of not having a current picture, but having a professional photo, making sure your expertise is filled out, your experience, your contact information. And then the last piece of sort of being open for business is being there consistently. I get asked all the time, you know, what's sort of the key to social media success? And whether you're an agent or a broker, it's being there consistently. And really, really engaging, and again, not spending all day, but just being there consistently. No tweet left behind. So I mentioned a little bit about Twitter, but one of the things that's really important to me, and when I think about recruiting for social, is the concept of no tweet left behind. If you're tweeting, tweet that. And what I mean by that is if someone takes the time to reach out to you, to tweet you, to send you a private message, to tag you in a tweet, respond to them. It may seem like a no-brainer. You might go, well, of course I would. But you would not believe how many people don't. So what is a response? A response could be, you know, just a thank you. It could be a smiley face. It could be a, hey, I appreciate it. But this is the philosophy that I take across all my social platforms. Meaning if someone reaches out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn or any other platform, I don't let it go unnoticed. And I think, especially when you think about recruiting and trying to kind of stay ahead of the pack and you know, being above, you know, the next person you're kind of competing for and competing for the Gen Xers, the Gen Yers, the millennials, it's a little thing that makes a big difference, right? Sometimes we all wish that, why couldn't people just email us, or why can't they just call us? There's all these different places we have to check now. And that's just kind of the reality of how it is. Some people might want to connect with you on Facebook. Someone might want to text you. So really kind of getting comfortable on their terms, on their platforms. Okay, so I'm excited to share this with you. So this is a social recruiting platform, social recruiting formula that I've been working on for some time. It's something I've taught, but as I was putting these slides together, I thought, you know what, this works much better when you put it together in a spreadsheet. And I know there's a lot of stuff on here, and you may not be able to read all of it. So I'm just going to mention right now, if you go to my Facebook page, you don't have to do it right now, but facebook.com/Katie Lance Consulting. If you just leave me a comment on my page, I'll make sure I get this to you, so if you can't read it, okay? So what this is I basically broke down social recruiting into 5 steps. And, you know, it's definitely not a hard and fast rule. So sometimes step 2 might be step 3, and step 4 might be step 5. But I've talked to a lot of agents, I've talked to a lot of brokers about recruiting, and what I found is this formula works really well. So, you know, step 1 is all about intel. All about getting intelligence on somebody. So this is sort of before you really reach out and talk to someone. Maybe you only know who they are and you know of them. So you're going to Google them. You look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Facebook, look them up on Twitter, and you're not going to reach out to them yet. You're just getting information. You're like gathering information about who these people are. A lot of research. You're going to look at, you know, what are their likes, what Facebook pages do they like, what are their interests. A little bit of the kind of putting on the detective hat, right, for your recruits. The second step is the first time you reach out to someone on social. So maybe you already know them fairly well, or maybe you just met them once, or maybe you were recommended by somebody. But the first time you reach out to them on social, I recommend that be through LinkedIn. So reach out to them through LinkedIn. And I say LinkedIn because LinkedIn is the professional network. Now, if you know them really well, it might be Facebook, but you never know. right? Some people with Facebook, they keep it really personal, private. Other people, not as much. But LinkedIn's sort of that safe first place to connect with people. I see a lot of you shaking your heads. So reach out to them on LinkedIn, meaning search them out on LinkedIn, but send them a personal invitation. Don't just send the generic invitation. I would send them a personal invitation that says, hey, so-and-so, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn, or just something short and simple. Send a personal invitation to connect, recognize them. If there's an opportunity to recognize them in that personal invite that you send them on LinkedIn, you can say something like, hey, I just saw you had a great deal last week. Congratulations. Would love to connect with you here on LinkedIn. If there's an opportunity to kind of congratulate them or recognize them through that personal invitation. At this point, there's also an opportunity to send them a link to your business pages. So if you have a company page on LinkedIn, if you have a Facebook business page on LinkedIn, you can send that to them as well and say, hey, you know what? I'd love for you to kind of check out what we're doing at a company level and social. Would love your feedback. What do you think? Right? Very low key. Here's the link to our Facebook page. Here's the link to our LinkedIn page. Just really, really kind of low key. Step 3 is reaching out through Twitter. Now, not everybody's on Twitter. I'll be the first to say that. But there are a lot of people, especially when you talk to millennials, who are on Twitter, especially young men. For whatever reason, that's sort of the demographic. A lot of young men are on Twitter. Not all. I'm on Twitter. So reach out to them on Twitter. Connect with them on Twitter. One of the reasons why it's great to connect on Twitter is you may not know them personally, but it's okay to connect. It's kind of the etiquette of Twitter that people can follow you that you don't know as well. That's okay. Once you follow that person on Twitter, if they're big into Twitter, you can add them to a list, into a private list of agents or potential agents. And then, just like I mentioned with Facebook, you're going to look at that list, see what they're doing, engage with them, retweet some of their content, and also tweet articles to them they might be interested in. And step 3 is really kind of all about Twitter. If they're not on Twitter, you can skip that step. Step 4 is reaching out on Facebook. Okay, so reaching out on Facebook, sending a Facebook friend request, really kind of depends again on how comfortable you are and how much you've talked to them and things like that. But send a Facebook friend request. It's usually a good point at this point. I always send a personal note as well that says, fix my mic pack here, that says, would love to connect with you on Facebook. By the way, that's a good tip. Anytime you send someone a Facebook friend request, always send them a little message too. Just kind of a good little rule of thumb. Add to a Facebook list, like I mentioned earlier. Be a good finder, like I mentioned earlier. Now that you've become Facebook friends with them, they're on a list. You're going to look at that list 5 minutes a day. If there's an opportunity to maybe leave them a Facebook voice message or recognize them, there's that opportunity. And then the last step, set up a face-to-face meeting. So, and again, some of your face-to-face meetings might already have happened up to this point. I realize social's not recruiting's not an exact science. But setting up a face-to-face meeting. And then this last step is really all about getting some more face time. So inviting them to an office meeting or inviting them to an event that you might be going to, whether it's an Inman event or maybe it's whatever it might be, a local bar camp event. Events are a great way to sort of bring a recruit to an event, especially if you're hosting an event, to say, hey, we would love to have you as a guest, especially if you're doing something social related or technology related, that really helps. And then follow up with a handwritten note, and then continue to engage on Facebook and Twitter. So kind of a simple blueprint, and a lot of this stuff is, you might go, well, that's simple, right? It's simple to do. It's also simple not to do. But especially when you think of social for recruiting, really, really big opportunities here. So a few more things here. I want to just touch on retention because recruiting's a big piece of it. But I would be remiss if I didn't also talk about retention because I always feel like that's the other half of the recruiting puzzle, right? So I always say, what's the point of recruiting if you never retain anybody, right? There's nothing worse than being in an office where there's a lot of turnover and people are moving and leaving. And what I found, just from my experience of working with a lot of agents, is that really one of the main reasons an agent leaves is just lack of recognition. They may say it's the money, and sometimes it is the money, but a lot of times, people want to really be somewhere where they feel special. And I know that sounds corny, but people want to be validated. They want to be somewhere where they connect with somebody, where they feel like, hey, I fit in here, I belong here. And so where I feel there's a big opportunity for retention is in private Facebook groups. Now, there's all different kinds of Facebook groups out there. There's public ones and private ones. But as a broker, as a manager, I can't say enough great things about creating a private Facebook group, a group that only your office, your team has access to. And I have done this with so many different clients, and I can't tell you, it's a little, at the risk of sounding corny, it's really kind of magical what happens in a small group. Because, back in the day, we used to see each other all the time for office meetings. And let's face it, office meetings a lot of times aren't happening as often. People aren't coming into the office as much. We're just not seeing people as much. And so what happens is a lot of our communication becomes through email. And we get these massive emails from people. We're sending out emails, right? I'm sure all of you are sending out emails all the time. Email has kind of been it's sort of fallen down the line of a good way to communicate. It's not necessarily the best way to communicate when you're trying to build a relationship with somebody. So a private Facebook group really allows your company culture, your team culture to be tight. It's a place to recognize, meaning if you've got a small private group of 20 or 50 or 100 agents, that can be the place where you go in once a week and you say, once a week, every Monday, I'm going to recognize somebody in my office in that group. I'm going to say, hey, kudos to Mary Smith. She had 3 deals this month. That's awesome job. Or whatever it might be. But being a good finder and recognizing people. And I'm sure you could recognize someone on your own personal profile. You could recognize them on a Facebook business page. All of those work. But there's something about being recognized among your peers, right? I also found that it's a great place to scale social media. Meaning the more you get involved in social media, the more your agents are going to ask you about social media. And what do I need to do for social? And should I have a Facebook business page? And you get all these questions. And whoever's managing that in your office, whether it's a marketing person or you or whoever it might be, you want to help agents, but it's hard to scale it. So having a private Facebook group where you can be a part of it, and maybe you have a couple other people on your staff that are a part of it, and you direct agents, hey, if you have questions about social media, join our social group, our private social group, whatever you want to call it, on Facebook, right? And then someone asks a question, everyone benefits from the answer. It's a great way to kind of scale social media, to scale these questions that a lot of agents are having about social. It's also a great way to kind of squelch things that maybe you don't want your agents doing, showcase best practices, things like that. A really great place to build camaraderie. Okay, public perception of your team. This is an important piece of retention also. What I mean by this is when someone is looking to move brokerages, or they're just thinking, okay, well, maybe it's in the back of their mind, or they know they have a meeting with you, or whatever it might be, they do what a lot of consumers do with agents. So consumers will Google agents, right? Potential recruits will Google you, or they will check you out on social, especially if they're kind of the social recruit that you might be looking for. I mean, if I was an agent and someone was trying to recruit me, I would go to their Facebook business page. And I would say, well, what are they doing on social? Oh, they haven't posted anything in 2 weeks? Right? And so think about the public perception of what you're doing on social. And so certainly a piece of recruiting and retaining, it has to also include, what am I doing on an office level for social media? Do I have a strategy? And I actually have 2 classes today where I talk a lot about content strategy and honing your strategy, which are going to be really good classes later this afternoon. Unfortunately, a lot of Facebook business pages are what I call Facebook graveyards. So Facebook graveyards, meaning the office or the manager had the best of intentions in setting up this Facebook business page, but things got busy, nobody was in charge of it, or everybody was in charge of it, but really nobody was in charge of it. Right? Somebody, everybody, nobody, anybody. Anybody could do it, but nobody did it. So you have to have a strategy, very important. And when you think about this, you're thinking of your public strategy. Recruits are watching, your agents are watching, obviously. Is it integrated? I think that's a really important piece to think about. Whatever marketing and branding you're doing on an office level already, how could you integrate it into what you're already doing? Support for agents, and then really leadership from the top. What's your leadership role in it from the top? I always like to say, what story can you or your office tell? I talked a little bit about storytelling earlier today, but there's so many opportunities to take a photo, to share it on Facebook, to kind of tell the story of what it feels like to be in your office, right? As an agent has the opportunity to showcase what it feels like to live in a certain area, what it feels like to live in a community. But you have an opportunity to showcase, what does it feel like to work in my office? What does it feel like to be here? And again, that might sound corny and kind of touchy-feely, But that's a big reason why people work and change, change brokerages and move and things like that. So different ways that we can tell their story, celebrating new agents. I think that's a huge opportunity. Every time you have a new agent, you make a big deal about it, right? You celebrate that, especially on social. Recognizing staff, right? This is near and dear to my heart because I was on staff at a brokerage for many years. But right, those guys work so hard, right? They're sort of like the unsung heroes of a real estate office. But recognizing those guys, they won't expect it. But recognizing them on your Facebook page, maybe once a month, being a good finder. Agent of the week, house of the week, community involvement. If you really start to brainstorm how you can tell the story of your office, there's some really cool things that you can do. My last couple things here, are you creating content? So if you're doing a lot of the things I'm already talking about, really the next level is thinking about creating content. And I'll be the first to say, it's not easy to start a blog, it's not easy to start doing video or podcasts, they're all time intensive. But I will say some of the people that are really taking things to the next level as a broker are creating content, right? They're getting in front of a video and they're doing a 5-minute video every couple weeks about the market or what's happening in their industry, and they're starting to create content. So something to think about. It certainly takes time and a strategy. It's not something you want to dive into lightly, but really sort of the next step after you kind of master some of the things I'm already talking about is really thinking about what content could we create, right? Whether it's a blog, whether it's a podcast, video, to showcase your leadership. So just to wrap up, I know I've got like 1 minute left here. Like I said in the beginning, social definitely doesn't replace face-to-face. It doesn't replace the coffee or the phone call or anything like that. But you've got to be intentional, especially if you want to use social for recruiting. You've got to get personal. I can't emphasize that enough. Really, you don't have to share everything. You don't have to share everything that you eat for breakfast. But you've got to think about, what can I share that I'm comfortable sharing personally? And that's going to connect you with people. It just makes a really, really big difference. Obviously having a strategy and obviously remembering that leadership starts at the top. So here's my contact information. The best way to reach me is on my website at katielance.com. I've got an email newsletter you can sign up for. I promise I won't spam you, but you can sign up there. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/Katie Lance Consulting. If you want a copy of the slides or the social recruiting formula I mentioned earlier, feel free to post a comment there today and I'll get that to you in the next day or two. Of course, I'm on Twitter as well, and I have 2 more classes later today, so hope to see you there. Thank you so much.